Hello everyone. Welcome to another session of Growth Chat by Mailmodo. I am Aquibur Rahman, your host, and we have today Trevor Sookraj, who is a who is a marketer in based out of Canada, and he has been helping several B2B startups to find their product market fit. He was a very early member team at Shopify Plus as well as Clearbit, and he helped those teams grow to a massive strength. And I welcome Trevor. How are you?
Good. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, Trevor. So to start with, I would want you to start with your own journey and how you got into marketing, how you grew into marketing, and help these brilliant teams to grow.
Awesome. Thanks so much, and excited to be here. So my background, I actually started out in tech sales. I'm on the marketing side. I joined Shopify Plus's team. I think it was back in 2016 to help them build out their enterprise side of the product. Up until that point, as a public company, they were largely self-serve product and trying to build out one for B2B sales and higher value clients. So worked with their team. And caught interest in trying to build out the growth for a company and realized that marketing and growth marketing was just another aspect of that skill set toolkit that a lot of business users and founders will take on. So I started to pick up growth marketing, initially actually email marketing and CRM marketing, and then getting into the other aspects of the sphere and ecosystem there. Worked with a couple of startups in Toronto part-time. One was #paid, which is like an influencer marketing platform. Another called Turnstile Solutions that was doing Wi-Fi marketing for restaurants that got acquired by Yelp. And when I was working at Shopify and kind of got into more the biz ops and analytics space, an opportunity came up with the Clearbit team, which is a B2B data enrichment platform for sales and marketing teams based out of San Francisco. And they were seed stage, about 22 employees at the time, and had an opportunity to join their growth team as the kind of first hire on the growth team side, and trying to build out their engine and get them to more repeatable scale with a lot of their products. So I moved up to San Francisco. They joined their team there, and over the course of the year, really helped them to test out different channels, figure out where they have repeatability with their markets, launch partnership programs with Zapier and Segments, and really understand like what how to get that to greater scale. Some of the biggest challenges, and I'm sure a lot of people listening who are working as marketers at early stage companies will relate to, is really having enough bandwidth in the day to get everything done. Yeah. A lot of founders and marketers have a million campaigns and tests they want to run, but you only have so much time in the week. So I was always constrained by the amount of time that I had. One of the solutions to that is usually to hire up people on your growth team. And for us at Clearbit, first off, like testing and experimentation was very important. So everything had to come complete with rationale and a test. But secondly, growth was very holistic, especially at the early stage. It wasn't just, can we generate users that are signing up and using the product? Clearbit was actually, and kudos to our founder, Alex, a very complex product. So as much as we had a self-serve, enrichment or prospecting product, we also had an enterprise and a sales-led product. We had Clearbit Connect as a Gmail extension, Salesforce Lite. Like there were a lot of different aspects of the product that could be leveraged. So a lot of our questions when we launched Experiments was, how do we actually look at the entire funnel and the full experience for the user, and not just look at, are we generating, customers or paying users? The other big benefit that, Clearbit was lucky to have, given the nature of the company, is we had Clearbit's database to power this. So we were already enriching and prospecting, millions of contacts that were coming in. So that was a big benefit for it. But, hiring for growth is not easy. It takes, several months at that stage to find the right person. The other option is usually using agencies, and agencies are very verticalized. So they would say, you can hire a paid ads agency, a content agency, like all the different, verticals there. And they do really good work. We had some amazing agencies at Clearbit that helped us with content and paid ads, but they're not invested in the product as far as seeing like the full funnel growth and, understanding that range of the customer. It's usually up to the full-time team to figure out. So I was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And when I came back to Canada in Toronto and started to do a lot of freelancing with seed Series A companies as like their first hire, I saw a similar problem, but this time as a fractional, part-time employee, where there was just way too many things to do in the course of the week, and I was starting to get burned out trying to balance everything. So that's really why I built Divisional about a year and a half or 2 years ago. which was the idea is can we create growth teams for early stage companies, typically B2B SaaS and seed Series A, helping them to, one, have a growth function as far as testing and experimentation and building that out. But two, a lot of great growth marketers, when they get shown at a seed stage company, have to join and spend 80% of their week on execution just because there's so much stuff to do. And most heads of growth and strategists don't actually enjoy that part of the job because they've done it in the past. So what we've done is actually created heads of growth and growth marketing managers as like a 2-person team where the head of growth can focus on the strategy and leadership of the team, and the growth marketing manager is a channel expert that can work on different places. So that's been our model now that we've rolled out. Worked with about 40 plus B2B SaaS companies in the last year. Some as early stage like Paragon and Live Control, and on the higher end, actually Hopin, and we're doing this via StreamYard today. So that's yes, on the higher end. And yeah, scaling up the team and helping a lot of startups and founders really to navigate that early stage growth and figure out how do I go from I have my first funding round and I have customers to getting to product market fit and scaling things up.
Yeah. So I remember when I started Mailmodo, it used to be the very difficult to hire anybody, not just growth market, but very difficult to hire because you don't have money, you don't have much time, you don't have the visibility what is going to happen next, right? So it is very difficult at that time, and most of my founder friends as well, they discuss the same thing. Hey, how do I hire my first growth first marketer, or first somebody who helped me with the growth, right? So what are the skill set would you look into this person especially where the founder is not from a marketing background, and we need to trust on one person that this person will lead the company to growth?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and really what it comes down to is based on the stage of your company, what that growth function means and what you're supposed to be doing. So typically, the first growth hire at a B2B SaaS company, as an example, needs to be able to learn about your business as much as you are. So a lot of times when we work with founders that are seed stage and early, they have a couple of customers. They probably got through investor networks or word of mouth or accelerators like YC. And they're trying to figure out, how do I get repeatability? Like, is there an opportunity to have consistent messaging and audience to be able to get scale here? So your first growth hire is really trying to test audiences, messaging, learn about your business. Typically, one of the biggest recommendations is that they should have a product marketing background, or at least an appetite for product marketing and a natural curiosity about your customers. So that heavy, analysis and thinking through, who are we selling to? Why are they buying from us? And why is this actually powering growth experiments should be the basis of everything. Whereas that's much tougher when you're working with a growth marketer or a growth hacker that's just testing channels and seeing if they can acquire customers. And the reason being is your first 10 customers as a startup likely will look different than your next 30 customers and your next 100 customers. And all of that is not just growth, that actually affects product and sales. Because a lot of times, and I'm sure a lot of seed stage or pre-seed founders can relate to this, your product is not this finished, amazing, system when you first launch it. It's iterating and it's learning, and your roadmap is connected to your customers. But if you can actually have that from a growth function, have that power, how you're building your product and how it's affecting, that's a very powerful, opportunity for your company, opposed to saying, growth is just working on demand generation and sales, and then product and engineering are working on their own timelines to do what they want. That needs to be like a very tight loop. The other thing that I would say is really important for a first growth hire is the ability to learn. So typically growth marketers have a T shape. So they will focus on certain areas, whether it's email, search ads, PR, something else, and they know everything else at a cursory level. You don't actually know, in a lot of cases at the early stage, what skill set you need for a head of growth until you figure out more about your customers and learn where they are. And to give you a prime example, my background has always been in email, and I picked up, paid acquisition as a new channel. Working with developer tooling products. So if you're selling to developers, cold email and trying to put them in those sequences rarely works, because they hate, demo requests and getting on emails and that kind of stuff. So you need to really think about, where do they live? And maybe that might mean podcast advertising, newsletter sponsorships, content and SEO. And if you hire someone who's saying, I have a really good background in email and paid, but I don't have an appetite to learn that type of stuff, they're not going to be able to adapt or launch those kind of campaigns to test things out. Whereas one of my friends that's a head of growth at a developer tooling company, came in with a background similar to mine, and is now running a podcast and is picking up things that he otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to do. But it's that appetite of like, I want to do what's best for my customer and get in front of them that I think makes that first growth hire really, really successful. Otherwise, I think in a lot of cases, the founder has to quarterback or lead the growth hire in what they're supposed to be doing. And as an early stage founder, you only have so much headspace. So you want to make sure that you're able to hand that off to a team and a growth lead that's able to take that on from your plate.
Yeah. So that's like very detailed answer actually. So like you mentioned about this skill set should be around product marketing. That is very helpful, right? But there's so many different types of skill like product marketing, growth marketing, content marketing. What are the differences between these, and how? Though you mentioned that the person should be T-shaped skill set person, but is there a theme in that, and are they related? These different skills, are they related?
Yeah, I would say they definitely focus on like certain verticals or areas that someone has background with. One thing I'll preface with when you think about growth marketer, and this is this term was only existed 5 or 10 years ago. We weren't talking about growth marketing prior to that, and now it's almost become a status quo. Is my first hire will be a growth marketer, and they're going to help me to grow the company. That's kind of what the name entails. But a lot of times, growth marketer is confused either with performance marketer or growth hacker. Growth marketer being let me go and test paid acquisition channels and figure out the best way to acquire, users, or growth hacker in that let me just do whatever makes the most sense to drive customers as fast as possible. Growth in its essence is really around how do I test hypothesis and assumptions about my customers. So every growth marketer, even though they're a growth marketer, they can have certain backgrounds they're more focused on, but the basis is that they should be coming into every conversation saying, what are the assumptions that we have about our customers? What hypotheses are we testing about why our product matters to them? And like, how is that actually panning out to emails where we're saying, if we're sending emails, we're sending 100, we're expecting certain open rates and conversion rates. If we're spending on paid ads, we're expecting 100 clicks with certain conversion rates. Like just being very, data-driven, holistic is what kind of drives growth marketing. But those T-shapes tend to focus, right? So if someone has an SEO or content background, those are typically in the same realm as like they're thinking about how can we both rank organically, but they probably overlap with search because they're saying we can't rank organically in overnight. So we're going to have to drive both paid search traffic and organic traffic. They'll think about it in that realm together. Likewise, it's possible that someone who has more of a performance marketing background might also understand analytics in that very well. So like that comes complete with CRO, conversion optimization and landing page building. That might also come complete with being able to set up, your analytics processing, whether it's Google Analytics, segment and product analytics, like other pieces of that. So I would say you tend to see concentrations or clusters based on the type of marketer that's coming in. But the baseline is that you need someone who has that growth marketing mindset or background as far as what they're supposed to be doing with the company, because they should be testing all those channels and experimenting with them with that in mind, opposed to saying like, we're just going to go and spin this up and see what happens. And I think that's the biggest difference with early stage growth and later stage growth. I've talked with some marketers who have worked at, Series B or C or onwards companies where they come into an early stage founder conversation where they raised a seed round, 2 months ago and say, well, here's our Q2 plan. And the founder says, I haven't had a product for Q1. Like I just finished the product. So like, I can't, commit to a 3 or 6 month plan. I need you to like test and iterate and learn with me. And that's a difference in mindset with like, early stage marketers versus ones that are probably used to having product market fit and being in a place where there's more predictability and longer term planning.
Yeah, and how does this team grow? Like you hired the first person, and then as a company grow to Series A, Series B, C, etc. How do you think this marketing team or the growth team grows, and what are the key elements or the necessary elements in this team?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it's something that take it with a grain of salt because I think every company, tackles it differently. What I've seen, and I'll look at some specific like companies or models that have tend to work well. In the early days, growth and marketing are pretty tightly coupled. So your growth team is both running experiments and also responsible for other aspects of your marketing. One of the companies that comes to mind here is Drift, Drift.com, like the chatbot messaging team. When we worked with them over at Clearbit, in their earlier days, they had a growth team that was building out experimentation and tests. When they started to get to, Series B and start to build their team, their growth and marketing team actually split off into separate functions. So they had growth that was still very focused on testing, experimentation, hypothesis, and that side of things. And they had marketing that was more focused on, field marketing, like events, thinking about PR, Product marketing was almost like a different function that was working more closely with the product and engineering team to figure that stuff out. So I would say sometimes when the company grows, those functions split across where they become almost different sides of the business. The other one, and I'm thinking more about companies like Samsara, their growth team actually grows, but then starts segmenting off based on the nature of the business. So you have, your head of growth and you have your growth marketing manager. As the company, scales, triples in size, you start to have a head of growth for one aspect of the company. Maybe it's like looking at retention or like, post sign up. Another one might be looking at like head of growth for customer success and like the other side of things. And then you have growth marketing managers that work under them that are still generalists, like they're working on different channels and tests, but they're focused on different aspects of the business. And that way they can almost own their own P&Ls for whether it's certain product lines or, different aspects of the business. So I would say that's typically the two models that I've kind of seen as companies scale. In either scenario, both teams will probably start to find specialists based off the nature of their business. So if I'm a growth marketer, head of growth for a company, and we're scaling things out, and I realize, again, 8 months in, that content and SEO will be the main channel for us, and we're going to have, that's where our market really sits. I probably need to hire a content marketer or someone on my team that can lead that out, who is not necessarily a growth marketer. Their background might not be attuned to that, but they have a skill set where they can actually take more ownership of that pathway and be able to build it out. Likewise, you might want to hire someone who's, and I've seen this a lot with like e-commerce or consumer apps, where they hire a performance marketer because they realize that like the landing page, paid acquisition, that side is just going to be a natural part of their business and they have to invest in it. Likewise for affiliate, likewise for, other aspects of the company they need to be able to build out. So I would say it's a couple different models to build and how you can kind of, make your organization grow, but it usually involves kind of splitting off into different functions and finding expertise for certain aspects of the company where you're able to work with them pretty seamlessly.
Yeah, before I move to the next question, I want to ask the audience to put their questions in the comment, and we'll take those questions one by one. Okay, so Trevor, you also mentioned about a lot about experimentation and hypothesis, especially during the early days of the company. And I remember when we started the company, and even now, we get a lot of ideas like let's do this, do that, etc. Like SEO, paid marketing, cold emailing, everything. How do I decide what to pick first? Because as like a small team, it is very difficult to do everything.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think what it comes down to is having strong growth framework and experimentation system for your company. So when you think about companies that are typically seed stage, pre-product market fit, I know it's a very popular buzzword. The way that I see product market fit is it's companies that have repeatable messaging and repeatable audiences that they're going after. And when you think about that, go a layer deeper. It's not just saying we can acquire customers predictably through Facebook or Google. It's saying that like these customers have a specific pain point that we can, if I show them this type of messaging, I will get repeatable acquisition for this company. What is really important at the early stage is being able to test out why your product resonates and with who, and make sure that's all very experiment driven and clear pass fail. So the importance of hypothesis tests and customer profiling is you're expanding your data, your knowledge of your customers. And then as you iterate from one test all the way to your like 10th, 15th, 20th test, you almost get higher conviction in what you're testing, or you're testing more specific aspects of your business that are less open-ended as far as like what you're trying to get down to. So to give an example of that, if you're a company that's early stage and you say that we sell to marketer, we sell to salespeople, and we sell to HR, representatives, within that, there's probably various pain points that you assume they have. Like, oh, marketers have trouble with a certain aspect of the role that involves analytics and visibility. Salespeople have a problem with scaling this effort. HR is a different function or different aspect. Within that, you also have different segments. As like maybe we're going after certain types of businesses, certain sizes of employees, like as far as the nature of the company. Those are all like trying to break down into like what are the highest value segments you're trying to go after. Typically, as a founder, you have hunches around this. So you'll say, yes, we do sell to all these people, but based on my initial pilot customers and talking to investors in the market, there's probably higher conviction behind certain segments here. That's what we'll do, again, from an experimentation perspective, is take one of those segments and say, well, actually, it's salespeople you should be going after because you have the highest conviction there. Let's prioritize experiments to test salespeople and this messaging. And then that's how you actually build your tactics. And then you can, work off of that by saying, we know what's going to resonate the most with salespeople. As you mentioned, I think as your company scales, you start to look less at strictly audience and pain points and look more at like tactics. And I know where these salespeople live and what they look at, but I think if we show up in a certain medium or we give them a certain resource, it'll make a difference to them. It's still relevant to that same framework, but I think it kind of it grows and expands afterwards. And that's how you get that stronger understanding of your customer, and be able to kind of scale things out. So I would say that's kind of why hypothesis building and testing is really important. And I've heard this again, Clearbit, since I've left has grown exponentially, and they still have experimentation as a key part. Like every campaign typically has, 2-week sprints and things they're doing there. I've seen this work at much bigger companies where they have growth sprints in specific areas, and they, rank their experiments using, I believe, like the ICE framework. So like impact, confidence, and ease to figure out like what's the actual value of the experiment. There's other pieces of this as far as like getting to stat sig. I'll drop a resource in the comment afterwards around that. So making sure you have statistical significance for some of the tests that you're running, or you have like milestones around that you're saying, ideally I want to acquire, or 1,000 clicks or do 1,000 clicks to get to this. But if I get to 100 and it's outside of a certain range, I know it's probably not going to work as an experiment. So that's why that's really important in early stages, because you don't have a lot of data. You don't know what's repeatable. And you're trying to understand like what is repeatable and more about your customers. So that way you're able to make hires more confidently. You're able to like make investments better in terms of like how you build your product, what you're working after, which is usually a miss if you're just thinking about total go-to-market motions.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very interesting thought process you have actually there. And you mentioned about PMF, and I believe that at early stage, finding PMF is the main goal of everyone in the company, right? So, in your experience, how would you define PMF? How a early team can find the PMF, and what are some frameworks or examples you can share with us?
Yeah, really great question. So I would say defining product market fit is I have a set audience, and a set like level, certain pain points that I know that they have, and I know how our product actually solves that. If you have that full, set of information, and you've tested it out, so and it comes back to growth at an early stage and like how that kind of works. If you have, if you go from 10 to 100 customers, but those 100 customers just look drastically different. Some of them came through your investor network. Some of them came through like word of mouth. Some of them look like, large companies, small companies. There's tons of variance in there. And there's less repeatability on why you actually use the product. That's where it becomes kind of concerning, because you hire on someone who's trying to do demand gen or growth, and there is no repeatability. They don't know where to actually focus. So that's really important to getting the product market fit, is knowing that like our product is specific for a certain vertical and has the most salience there. So that's why we have to just figure out like what the messaging is and how to get in front of them and everything that's kind of connected to that. One of the examples that I'll share is a product called Live Control, and I'll drop it in the chat here. If you want to share it in the comments. But they're effectively how their product works is it's both hardware and software for live streaming, and we worked with them for last year seed through their Series A round. And one of the things they ran into is their product really could be used for a lot of different use cases, but they found repeatability when they focused on religious institutions, so like churches, synagogues, like live streaming of those events, especially during COVID. And then the answer to that was, okay, we have repeatability with that audience. We know why they buy from us. A lot of our customers are starting to look like this. Let's then figure out channel market fit and try to understand like what are different channels and repeatable ways we can acquire customers that way. And it was only once they actually had that down were they able to say, let's go after a new audience, which might be like entertainment venues or funeral homes or like additional, layers of their audience. But that was only once they had repeatability within one segment that was big enough to kind of justify scaling the company. You've seen this again with companies that are significantly larger than this. And I was chatting with the Samsara team recently, and for them, like they were, it's IoT tracking, but it's fleet management, but it's also like dash cams and visibility. So there's different product lines and there's different, audiences they can almost sell to. So they've, I guess in their initial days, were validating it around IoT and analytics for trucking, focused on a certain segment. Once they had repeatability and can acquire customers there consistently, then they're going and testing new verticals. But that's when you have a repeatable engine you can kind of trust to drive results. And like exactly why it works and what's kind of going after that. So I would say that's really getting the product market fit for a lot of these startups, is understanding, audience pain points? Do I have repeatability in being able to acquire customers like this? And this even comes back to, channels and tests from like an email perspective. For an example, like if you have very high conviction around this person has this pain point, and we know this from a data perspective, you could write the worst cold email in the world, but they might still respond and give you, a demo on the time of day, because it's like, oh, I can actually see how relevant this is. Whereas, you contrast that to if you're just testing and saying, well, this person is seed and therefore they care about my product, and it's kind of like, tough to really zone in on. I'll open the email and just probably archive it or not respond if it's not relevant to me. And I think that applies to every different channel you can work on. If someone's searching on, Google, or seeing an ad on LinkedIn or Facebook, or, even seeing organic results, like that all connects back to, does this pain point and audience really exist? And if it is, you'll get an actual reaction from that audience, and they'll want to buy your product. And that's the product market fit that you're trying to get to, so that when you get to, your Series A or Series B in repeatability, at that point, you're really just making investments based on what you know, and figuring out like, what is our plan for Q3 to be able to acquire X number of customers. So at that point, it looks a lot more similar to demand generation and planning. Whereas in the earlier stages, you just don't have that repeatability, and learnings you have, especially at the very early stage when you just raise a seed round. You're, in 3 weeks, you could learn something about your product and customer base. It just changes your entire perspective on the company. And that's something that if you're testing oriented, you'll learn from and be able to implement into your system. Whereas if you're thinking, longer term and in different veins, that's tougher to do.
Yeah. So you also mentioned about channel market fit. Like one is the product market fit and then the channel market fit. And eventually, I believe that this is going to be the role of the marketer or the growth head to understand which channel fit for your market or the fit for your product.
Yeah.
So what is the framework to attain that or find that?
Yeah, and it's funny because especially for non marketers, so founders that are typically coming from other backgrounds, this gets a little bit misconstrued. So it's important to understand like what channel market fit actually means and how it's different than how some startups might think about it. The way most startups think about this, and founders that I've talked to, is testing channels. So I'm a seed stage company. I have 10 customers. They look very different. I got them through my investor network or word of mouth. I need to now acquire 80 customers or go from 100K to $1 million ARR to raise my Series A, whatever some of those key metrics are. So they're thinking, I need to go and test outbound email. I need to test search engine marketing. I need to test this channel, that channel, and naturally I'm going to find fit with one of them. So what they do is then they go and hire a bunch of agencies. So they hire an email agency, a paid ads agency, whatever. The problem is those agencies are used to using frameworks and repeatable systems. So because they're an external party and those people are managing 15, 20 clients, they need you to tell them what is the hypothesis and areas that you focus. That works at later stage because you have repeatability. That doesn't work at early stage because you don't actually know who you're targeting. So when you hire some of these companies to come in and you say, and I'll give you a prime example. We worked with an e-commerce SaaS company, so like software that's selling to e-commerce companies. And the target market, right, as a seed stage company was any e-commerce store that does 1 million or more in revenue. And that I said that's pretty much every store. Like there's a lot of stores that do that. So if you're saying let's go and scrape hundreds of stores and send them emails, we were getting like very low response rates, and there wasn't much conviction there because you didn't really understand the audience very well. So at that point, some founders might say, oh, I hired an email agency and they weren't working, so I'm just going to fire them and say email doesn't work. Let's go find channel market fit somewhere else. But if we took a second look there and realized we just had to segment that audience better. The minute we started finding segments of like, oh, if they're using certain tech, they have these problems and that's why they respond to it. Then we actually could generate, 10, 20 demo requests for a month from some of these channels and driving like some of their biggest customers. And that's only because we actually thought about it from like a persona and pain point and not from like a test channels and get results type perspective. And that's, I think, the biggest mindset shift that has to happen for a lot of founders and teams is testing channels means testing channels with a strong understanding of your customer, because you know where your customer lives and what you're doing. And that's where channel market fit comes in. So to give you an example of that, like practically, if you're selling software where it doesn't really, the space is very new. So they're like, people are maybe what we call problem aware, like they have this problem, but they're not solution aware. They're not actively looking for products. They're not on G2 or Capterra trying to figure out what this looks like. If you're in that scenario, one of the challenges is, I can't actually run search ads, for example, because no one's searching for this. So maybe that, you'll have some hypothesis, and we're doing this with some of our companies where there's low volume. It might make sense. Let's test it out. You might not even have competitors, which means you can't bid on competitor advertising and try to do that. So search might be a backburned item for you. Likewise, maybe you can try to do things on paid social. But if you're targeting LinkedIn and you're a SMB or a smaller value product, maybe just the cost per click and balance doesn't make sense for you to target out. So you start to realize, well, if we have a product that's very nascent, we don't have competitors, people don't understand the space better, maybe our two biggest levers that we'll have to learn, again, with that thought process in mind, is probably content SEO and partnerships. So as you start to investigate in that, run tests and like figure out what kind of works there, then you get to a place where you can say, okay, we look back in the last year, we did this with one of our customers recently, and could say out of the 40 customers you acquired, 35 of them came from SEM. And that means that like you need to, now think about this as you have channel market fit with that audience and with a certain channel. Let's go and investigate how to scale that out. And that's like more of an optimization problem. Whereas the testing of audiences and figuring out where you have salience is more of a growth and like testing, product market fit problem. And that's really the difference, I would say, between product market fit and channel market fit. They're very related. But one of them is, I understand my product and the messaging and the repeatability that I have. But can I actually find where that has the greatest, conversion rate? So maybe, and once you understand your customer really well, I'll give you an example. Maybe you go from 10 to 50 customers, but you've acquired like, 10 via partnerships, like 15 via cold email, like that's kind of a split of customers. Your next question might be, what is the most efficient way to acquire customers for my business now that I know where I'm targeting? And then when you look at that from a deal perspective, that's where down funnel metrics start to make a lot of sense for marketers. You're not looking at an ads dashboard and saying, what's my CAC and ROAS and results on that. You're looking at, I can acquire 50 leads a week from Facebook, but only 15 of them take a demo. And out of the 15, 1 or 2 close. Whereas I can acquire 20 from an affiliate or different system, and they end up having, 15 demo requests, and I get 5 customers. And then when you actually look at it full funnel, then you can start saying, what is our, CAC? What are the actual metrics here that matter? And then start making investments in channels that make the most sense. But it's so crucial to only do that when you have repeatability for your customer segment pain point, and not doing it when you just have, hunches around what channel is going to work the best, because there's a lot of false positives that will come up where they say, I've tested this channel and it didn't work for us, so I'm not going to invest in it. And then realize like you have to really be, dialed in on why you're testing a specific channel and what the outcome is supposed to be there.
Yeah, true. That's like a whole lot of knowledge in just a few minutes. Yeah. So another question that I generally get, like from most of the founders, is that they come from a tech background or product background, and they don't understand marketing, and sometimes they don't understand what marketers are saying. And it becomes very important for the growth of the company that they start understanding what the marketer in the team is talking about, or why is something needed to be done, or even if it is needed to be done. So,
Yep.
what are the ways or things that a founder can quickly get the basics of marketing or growth?
Yeah, definitely. I'll share a couple of resources here that I would think are pretty relevant from I guess, like resource perspective. So one of them, and this is again an intro to growth. Julian Shapiro, Demand Curve, their community, amazing for growth, and he actually has a free course on his website that just kind of runs through. Here are some of the ways to think about growth and how to build out your business. Another one that's I think based out of a team in Atlanta, Georgia, is Forget the Funnel. So they have a lot of resources that are almost similar to this. They have podcasts that you can filter and look at from what are specific segments of like I want to look at copywriting or product marketing or affiliate and that kind of stuff that makes a lot of sense. The other one from a conceptual understanding is Growth Machine when it comes to SEO and building out background there. So I found that's pretty useful as well if you want to skim and get a good understanding of SEO. So those are all I'd say resources where you can start to learn more about what it is, what it means to actually build your business, how to take a greater understanding of growth, and you can ask like more thoughtful questions around I guess the type of business that you're trying to build out, and what that kind of means for you. The other one, and I'll share the Amazon link that I'd say is pretty solid as well. There's let's see here. I think it's called Crossing the Chasm. So there's another book as well that kind of talks more about what is the stage of your product, what is the maturity, where's the repeatability you're supposed to be. Those are all things I think founders can participate in and learn about to really understand like where is my company from a maturity perspective, and what does that mean for where we're supposed to be investing in growth. But the funniest thing is that when you hire a growth person, or whether it's part-time or full-time or whoever you bring onto your team, the biggest difference I've seen with founders is taking a serious interest in what they're doing and trying to understand it. That's a very big difference between trying to control it. And I'll give a comparison there. I've worked with some founders that typically have MBAs or backgrounds that are like, I can pick up skills very quickly. And their reaction, again, just based on personality and interest, is typically, I want to learn how to actually do this myself. So like, you'll run my Google ad test or email, but I want to learn ASAP how I can take it in-house and do it myself. That's a miss for a lot of founders, because if your skill set is product engineering, you need to build that out. Your goal should not be, let me actually learn how to do everything myself so I don't have to be dependent on another product. That's part of growing your company. What is the difference there is taking an active interest and asking questions about, why are you doing this the way you're doing? Can I wrap my head around that? If you work with a good head of growth or growth marketer, their biggest skill is probably communication. So they can tell you why they're doing what they're doing. Whereas when you hire channel specialists, people that just want to keep their head down and do work, it's a black box. You want to actually understand why things are working and not. And that's the biggest miss when you think about seed stage and early stage growth, is you have to have that understanding of how your product is growing. I'm working with a founder that's an engineer through and through, and is building a developer tooling product. And she asked so many good questions around like, why are we doing it this way? I had an idea. Does this make sense to you? Can you review my email copy? Like stuff where it's like, I can tell there's a clear interest in that. And that means that like, we still have a lot of autonomy as a growth team to be able to run projects and experiments, but I know that the founder is actually invested, opposed to saying like, go and do your thing and come back to me with results. Because one, you're not tapped into learning, but two, like, and I've seen this again from a channel expert perspective. We've worked with someone who understood Google Ads very well and said, let's go and test this for this reason. Very good methodology and reasoning. But it was a seed stage company that had never spent money on ads, and they spent, I think it was $9,000 in a month, and didn't get a lot of results. And this is a person who had come from like later stage, like, larger organizations where that's one, it's a drop in the bucket, and two, that's just how you test channels. But if you can't communicate that to a founder, all the founder is going to look at it and say is, we spent $9,000, we didn't get any results. So like, what is the actual meaning for the test here? And I think that's really the difference with, again, it's both sides. It's the founder of actually taking an interest in marketing and understanding it, but it's also for the growth marketer to hire people who have an interest in like sharing and communicating what they're up to and like want to be involved in that. Just as much as your head of growth or growth marketer should also be involved in product discussions. Like I join, product stands up and that kind of stuff for early stage companies. I'm not an engineer. I'm not powering the discussion and telling them what to do, but I ask questions about like, hey, I saw this from a customer perspective. Is this why we're building it this way? Or like, is this what's on the roadmap? And likewise, they get more respect for me and interest in having me in the discussion. And I want to have them in the discussion. And you kind of bridge that gap between growth and product engineering, which at the early stage is the toughest thing to do, because when you think about a founder-led team, you have your CEO and CTO and that side, but you're all co-founders. So you're in the same room all the time and you're talking to things like you're on the same page. That starts to split and segment the more and more you build out your company. And if those companies are siloed, or those organizations are siloed, you're not going to have that learned experience of like, why are we acquiring customers and why are they not retaining? Or, if I'm a sales rep and all I care about is just hitting quota, I can get you 50 customers that all churn after the first year because the product wasn't ready, but there wasn't that tight feedback loop. It's a big miss from a founder and product setup perspective for growth.
Yeah, so that is again very insightful, that as a founder, we need to ask more relevant questions and take active interest in what people are doing, rather than just controlling them and building a black box of just a specialist. So we have a lot of questions in the chat. I will just start putting questions one by one.
Oh, yeah, I think it's frozen for me as well. Got it. Okay, hit the questions here. Great. So first question, in the early days, should one focus on industry segments, say real estate, hospitality, or should you focus on building product lines that serve multiple industry segments? It's a really good question, and I think it depends on the nature of your company. So I've worked with a lot of companies that we'll call them vertical SaaS products. So they're building as some of these companies, and this is a for the founders or aspiring founders out there, something to maybe to pay attention to or think about. As a lot of these companies get pretty big, and we're talking about Shopify, Zapier, like massive companies. There starts to be opportunities from a vertical perspective. So building Shopify for construction products, or building Shopify for telehealth, or like basically segmenting off is opportunities to build fairly big companies. These are obviously not like Stripe's, scale companies, but companies that like have a lot of meaning and can get, outcome as big acquisitions or pretty big teams. So I think it really depends on the founder and thinking through, what are you passionate about or who you're trying to serve. Typically, and to give an example, industry segments means you're probably building more robust products for a certain vertical and it makes it specific to them. Whereas product lines that serve multiple industry segments means you're looking at a shared pain point and trying to build a product that spans multiple aspects of those. So to give an example, industry segments, if you're going after, and I give construction as an example, if you're trying to build project management software for construction, you're probably building a lot of different tooling, whether it's like to-do lists, timeline tracking, automated follow-ups, like everything that is related to that specific product. You're probably integrating with related construction tech products like Procore or other sides. And you're doing that all from like a support perspective. Whereas if you're building one product that serves multiple industries, maybe the pain point, and I was working with a product recently that's like, copywriting, like autocomplete copy. That's relevant for marketers. That's relevant for, or Superhuman as an example, right? It's relevant for numerous people that write email a lot and want to go faster. They're looking at a very specific pain point and trying to like have repeatability there, but that product looks quite different because their product is serving like a specific aspect of their job. You're not saying this is like the default for every marketer. So I would say that's kind of the decision tree that kind of has to happen is either you want to focus on industry segments and build out, like a suite for a specific type of person, or you're focusing on building a product that serves a specific pain point across multiple segments. Personally, I'm a big fan of verticalization. I think there's a lot of potential if you say, let me just understand this segment really well and service them properly, and like build out products that kind of scale for there. Because you always have that option to build for multiple segments, right? When you're building for a product that serves many segments at the same time, there's always going to be the question, I'm sure this is a product and engineering problem, where do we focus? Like, do we start building based on this segment or this segment? And like, how do we kind of scale things out? Whereas if you're focusing on one segment, understanding them really well, it's easier to say, let's now go and tack on retail along with hospitality, or let's tack on another industry and build additional products for them. I would say it's, from what I've seen, hard to go the other way around, but it's purely the founder preference and where you want to build and how you want to build. I wouldn't say there's a right or wrong answer when it comes to growth. Awesome. Yeah, see, there's other questions that have come up here.
Yeah, another question here. So Asma asks, in the early stage, how do you think about brand marketing?
Yeah, this is a really, really good question, because I think it kind of spans multiple areas, and it all depends on the nature of the product and where you're at. There are companies, to give an example, that have grown purely off of sales and having, a decent website of like how they kind of work. And if they're not well known, it's not like everyone says, oh, this is the product I need to use when I'm at a certain scale, but they've been able to scale out just by having like repeatability with their customers and base. It also depends on like the nature of your industry and kind of like where you're kind of focusing on from a brand perspective, because to give a counter example, if you're building in a nascent space, so you have a product that there is not maybe great awareness around what your product does, why your product's necessary, but you need to get in front of them, maybe investing in brand marketing from how do we start to get in front of this audience more from an awareness perspective, right? And this kind of comes into like what tactics are separated from acquisition versus awareness. So if you're thinking about, I need to get in front of, and I'll give a practical example here. I need to get in front of hospitals. Like, I need to sell to hospitals. I'm emailing all of them, but they're not opening my email. So they're opening it, but they're not responding. You can make the assumption that like hospitals have longer procurement processes. So they can't just make decisions based on whatever startup looks the coolest. They need to actually like have meaning and background on why this product matters. So if you look at a brand marketing perspective, you're saying, well, maybe we need to upload this list to LinkedIn, start showing them awareness ads to get like up to a certain frequency. maybe we start investing in like newsletter sponsorship or advertising to people that are relevant to like that audience space and getting in front of them. And then that will actually impact conversion and improvement. So I would say that's kind of how brand marketing I would say is relevant for me, and how I think about early stage brand is it's usually connected to like the ability to do acquisition. And it's not always, fully necessary to invest in it if you have repeatability and product opportunity, but it very much differs, right? And a parallel there might even be with like account-based marketing, where you're saying I'm selling to enterprises that have, these are 100K, 200K deals. I can't just, run one campaign that says sign up for a demo and that's it. You could even say that brand marketing is webinar and like awareness driven for some of these companies, where I'm saying I need to get in front of the right stakeholders long enough to be able to make them aware of my company so they convert when there's clear activity here. That's all like more of a brand, approach. The third, piece here is around more of a content and SEO perspective, as like, do I want to be showing up a lot when people are searching for terms related to my brand? And that's less about like, hey, are people hearing about my company a lot? And that's more about being an authority figure. And to give an example there, and Clearbit, if you check out their site, does a great job of this. They've tried to own not just the data enrichment space, but also the RevOps and like, and that analytics space of like, how should marketers and salespeople work? So a lot of their content they put out is related to like, how do you set up these kind of systems, practical thought leadership on like how are really good heads of growth and growth marketers doing this at big organizations. That is all technically brand marketing. Like, you're trying to improve your brand. And when we launched, when I worked there, we launched 2 books, Data Driven Sales and Data Driven Marketing, which I'll actually share links to. But neither of them actually were massive drivers from like, hey, can we get immediate customers from this? But we had tons of views and lots of virality that came from it. And what I was actually tasked with doing with my job there, from like a SQL and BI perspective, was looking at how many people had viewed this before signing up, how many of them viewed it after signing up, and like, how did this actually impact the sales process? And we were able to drive pretty straight parallels to what we call influence revenue. So we had many customers that actually accelerated their sales cycle, were cold but came back because of these type of resources, and that's all because they started to see us as more legitimate, right, as a product. So I'll share the link there, and you can share it in the comments. But that's one that I would say is like an example of, it's brand marketing. It's not PR or just like showing ads to say here's what our company is, but it's technically more authority and thought leadership marketing than it is like brand. But it's all related to, now when I mention Clearbit to most marketers, they know off the top of their head, like, that's, yeah, of course I know what they do and how they're helpful. That is not disconnected. Like, I don't think we really ever ran like, video. If you've seen like the Monday.com ads or some of those on YouTube, like, we're not writing, really fancy and edited videos to show us like, oh, this is the ultimate tool for data enrichment, and it's not conversion oriented. We did it more from an authority perspective, but that was still very relevant because now it's pretty pervasive as a product.
Yeah. I have another question, my Zishan. What is the typical time period you can invest to test a growth channel?
Yeah, really, really good question. And I think what this comes down to is being very data driven and metrics driven, and understanding what kind of impacts the nature of your business, right? So I'll give you an example. If you're saying I have a product and I have a hunch that like our customers run into a certain pain point, I'm going to test out search ads, and I want to see whether search ads has salience for this specific angle of getting approach with it. It's quite possible that you're saying, and this is a whole other case of experimentation, but if you say, I think my customer has pain point A, I have 3 ideas on how I can test pain point A. And we're doing this with one of our companies right now. One of them is outbound email. One of them is search ads. One of them is something else. If you have straight data behind that and you're saying, here's my expectation. So I'm going to send qualified audience. I need to get 100 emails that have at least X number of responses that are positive. I need to send, I need to get 100 clicks or 500 clicks to a landing page and get certain conversion rates. Those are all hypotheses you have in like experiment frameworks. That it will be impacted by the nature of your product, right? So if you're saying, today, I want to go and test outbound email, you likely don't have a warmed up domain. You don't have inboxes that are ready to send it volume. Maybe you need to connect it to a tool like Mailmodo and get things warmed up first before you can actually test. That might take a week or 2. Then you're saying, let's actually test it out and have an email sequence that goes out over 2 weeks. If you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, we sent this and there was just no value behind it, but we ran other tests in parallel with the same audience, and we realized that search actually was driving conversions, or other places were driving conversions, there is the ability to say maybe over a 3 to 4 week period that like, we're going to invest more in doubling down on certain channels versus others. But it's all about setting up your foundation and knowing like what kind of data you're looking at. Because if you're thinking about this from a, I'm gonna test email and I want to send 100 and I'll send it to a different, sequence. Like you could try that again and again for several months. But it really just comes down to like, what are your expectations for that channel and outcome, and what does that mean for your product? To give an example, if you're testing a specific audience and you've tested it on 3 different channels and different approaches and like nothing's working, maybe you need to go back to the drawing board and think about like, was our assumption even correct? Like maybe that's the wrong hypothesis. Maybe they don't care about that. So we need to start shifting to like something else. And there's a lot of, I think, ways you can segment, right? If you look at outbound email, you can say maybe it's open rates, click rates, and respond rates for demos. If you're looking at paid ads, if it's paid social, LinkedIn, Facebook, Google Display, that kind of stuff, maybe it's click-through rate from a qualified audience and conversion to demo. If it's the search ads could be a similar thing we're trying to put up for your company. So it's really dependent on the startup and what kind of makes sense for you. And as long as you're framing those tests properly, you could say after 4 weeks, like, LinkedIn is just ridiculously expensive and we can't get in front of the right audience. We're way better off in email. So let's backburn LinkedIn for now and focus on email. But as long as it's being informed from a audience and segment testing, because thinking about it in the opposite perspective, if you're saying, I'm just going to run a bunch of LinkedIn ads to different audiences and you don't actually have any hypothesis powering that, what is your outcome? Like you spent a bunch of money, you haven't got conversions, and you're saying, well, I don't actually know if it's LinkedIn, it doesn't work, or if it's because these people don't care about, like, they don't exist on this product. Those are all questions that you might have. But if you build it from a strong foundation of like who our audience and pain point is, makes it so much easier at scale to be able to, know where to invest and kind of how to pan that out.
Yeah. So we are already now about more than 50 minutes. So I'll just take one last question. So how do you get to get the first 10, 50, or 100 customers in an org?
Yeah, really good question. And I think it really depends on the stage of the business and like the nature of the industry you're playing within. A lot of this comes down to customer development and testing hypothesis, even from the earliest stage. And if you're a pre-seed or a founder that has not raised capital, that's really what you're trying to do at the end of the day. You're saying, I think there's a pain point in a certain industry. I think people care about this. I'm still building that same understanding of like, how can I get customers and see if there's salience that way. Having good conversations, I think, is one of the most important things at your earliest stage, where you're saying, I'm not jumping on a call and saying, let me sell you on this, and let me, like, your email or your ad is not saying, hey, like, let's convert to this immediately. A lot of times your initial conversations, especially I'm talking about B2B SaaS and larger value products, is just understanding more about like their experience, like what they struggle with, like, is it connected to the product that you're building? And that's usually, and I'm seeing this firsthand from a seed stage perspective, your first 10 or 20 customers come from one of a couple areas, right? And it might come from doing that and a startup saying, this product is not finished. I don't know if it's actually the best fit for me, but I love working with this founder and I think they're onto something really cool. So let's actually go and invest in this and switch over to them as a product. The other one is probably your investor network. If you raise capital, there's opportunities for them to say, other companies in our portfolio or our network, if you go through YC, there's other companies that will naturally, want to try your product or be good fits for your product. And the third one is probably just word of mouth and like referrals of companies that are like, hey, I think this is relevant for me and I'd want to get in touch with you. That's how I would say you get your first handful of customers, where they're paying you. They might look pretty different. They might have come for different reasons, but that's how you build out stronger hypotheses around like where we build their product and how we take this stuff to market. Because your first couple of customers validate that your product has, a salience and like they care about this. Now you're trying to find repeatability, right? Because you probably got those customers in quite a different way. So I'd say that's usually how I would think about building out, certain aspects of your business. We're even doing this for my company right now, where all of our clients thus far have come through referral and word of mouth, and they come through different avenues. Now that we have we have I guess hypotheses around repeatability and what's going to work. Now it's about thinking, how do we take this to a larger scale and start testing out different areas to get in front of them. But that's all a subset of already having some sort of customer base to work off of. Because at the earlier stage, if you don't have any customers, all you really have is ideas and hypotheses, and like you have to test those some way. And that's typically how I would say a lot of early stage companies acquire customers. Very different based on scale of company, right? If you're looking at, I'm talking about larger, B2B SaaS companies that have annual contracts and stuff that's probably like 20K plus ACV. If you're talking about, I'm selling to like individuals, like I'm a consumer product, or I'm like B2B, but it's selling to SMB, so it's like $50 a month. Maybe at that point, it is just straight customer acquisition, right? It might look more similar to we're running search ads where we're saying, can I just get, X people to sign up and start trialing my product without paying for it? I've seen this actually from a more of a like testing on an e-commerce perspective, when people are saying, is my e-commerce idea going to actually have like value and be relevant? And what's worked there is they'll say, I'm going to set up a landing page. I'm going to have a hypothesis of who's going to care about this. There's a great growth person I would kind of follow, and he has a newsletter as well, Justin Mayers, who runs Kettle and Fire and Perfect Keto. And it was also actually the founder of a SaaS app called FOMO that's kind of used for other e-commerce stores. But he kind of talks about his early experience with Kettle and Fire, where he basically, put people through a ads landing page all the way to like converting and like putting their PayPal information in. And then he had to actually go back and email them and say, hey, like, we actually don't have the product ready yet, but I will give you 50% off when it's ready, because it'll be ready in a couple of weeks. But he's building based on there being specific need. Might be a similar thing from SMB and targeting those type of companies, is like you at that point, it might not make sense to jump on calls with people that are only paying $50 a month. So you kind of need to say, can we just convert them directly to initial sales? But that, I think, is kind of the beauty of early stage marketing, is a lot of this is based off testing hypotheses, seeing intent, iterating based off of that. The way you approach marketing and product development, again, for your first 5 customers changes when you acquire your next 5, changes when you acquire your next 30. And I think as long as founders are aware of that and are thinking about it from like a growth perspective, it's really not about, just saying, I've started my company, I raised a seed round. If I hit 1 million ARR in a year, I can raise my Series A. That's your North Star metric. That's always going to be important as a founder, but it's recognizing the journey to get there and all the stuff that you have to almost change and iterate in progress there. Otherwise, I think you're almost putting blinders on and saying, I just have to go and acquire customers. And like at that point, the learning, the product development, there's a lot of things that can kind of fall apart if you're not powering it all from like an experimentation and growth mindset.
Yeah. And so thanks a lot. And that would conclude our discussion today, Trevor. And your everything that you told has been very insightful. And in just within an hour, we got to learn, like, from starting a company to what is Series A, Series B kind of journey. So thanks a lot again, Trevor. Any parting words that you want to say to our audience?
No, appreciate everyone hopping on today. And yeah, happy to take any questions if you want to reach out to me directly about startup and growth. I think it's not an easy path. I think growth marketing is very new for a lot of companies. It's different than growth hacking, which was kind of the 2015, 2016, like, Facebook is easy to acquire. Like there's opportunities to get like pretty big returns on certain channels. So yeah, happy to answer any questions about that. And you can follow Divisional.co and get in touch with us on LinkedIn as we're sharing more resources that are kind of similar to what we're talking about today.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Trevor. And I will end the session now.
Perfect. Thanks so much.